Without further ado, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Marcus Resendez, CEO of 434 Media and aligned partner to Velocity Texas. I'm honored to welcome you on behalf of Methodist Healthcare Ministries, Velocity Texas, Duke Capital, and the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. We're broadcasting today from the eBridge Center in Brownsville, which serves as a hub for innovation and collaboration. We are honored to be here today and believe that by working together, we can create a thriving ecosystem of sustainable enterprises that improve health equity for all. Whether you are here in person or tuning in online, your presence reflects our shared commitment to creating a healthier and more equitable future. Now, today's discussion isn't just about identifying challenges. It's about driving meaningful change. That's why Methodist Healthcare Ministries and Velocity Texas have launched a strategic 3-year collaboration investing in research and innovation to drive solutions that address systemic health disparities through social determinants of health. SDOH encompasses key factors such as education, economic stability, and access to health care. Those are the fundamental elements, that shape individual and community well-being. Now, through their combined expertise and resources, this partnership is working to break down systemic barriers and create lasting pathways to health equity. So let's get to know our dance partners a little bit better. Methodist Healthcare addresses health disparities, and really, in order to do that, it requires more than just good intentions. It demands strong institutions committed to lasting change. MHM is the leading example, working tirelessly to improve community health beyond traditional medical care. MHM operates across 74 counties in Texas, serving a diverse population where issues like limited public transportation, broadband access, and financial hardship create significant health barriers. Recognizing that wellness extends beyond clinical treatment, MHM takes an integrated care approach addressing the broader social and economic factors that influence health outcomes. Through initiatives such as Wesley Nurses, community health workers, and family enrichment programs, MHM empowers individuals and strengthens communities, reinforcing the belief that true wellness is built through education, economic stability, and strong support networks, not just medical intervention alone. Addressing those challenges, though, requires more than just healthcare and healthcare systems. It also demands a thriving ecosystem where innovators, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders can develop groundbreaking solutions. That's where Velocity Texas comes in. Based in San Antonio, Texas, Velocity Texas is a leading bioscience research hub founded on the principle that breakthrough happens faster when experts collaborate across disciplines. By fostering a cross-industry partnership environment, they accelerate the development of life-changing innovations in healthcare and beyond. At the heart of their vision is the creation of an innovation district, a transformative initiative that's designed to spur inclusive economic development, provide new opportunities in historically underserved areas, and serve as a launch pad for startups pushing the boundaries of medical technology. This commitment in collaboration and innovation align perfectly with the mission we share today, which is driving real, sustainable change in health equity. Now, with Methodist Healthcare Ministries and Velocity Texas leading the way, this initiative goes beyond raising awareness. It creates real opportunities for innovation and business development. So let's take a look closer at the core components that are designed to drive meaningful impact. The seminar series, which is what you're participating in today, serves as the foundation, educating and empowering students, healthcare professionals, and community members by examining how social and environmental factors create real barriers to health. These sessions don't just highlight the issues, they provide actionable insights on topics like market analysis, funding strategies, and regulatory requirements, helping participants turn knowledge into practical, community-based solutions. Building on that foundation, we're launching a 2-day startup boot camp that's powered by Geekdom and UTRGV to equip early-stage entrepreneurs with the tools they need to succeed. Now, this program helps participants fine-tune their business models, develop operational strategies, and prepare for scalable growth. Our goal is to see more companies address the unmet needs of our communities, whether that's in telehealth, nutrition, transportation, or innovative financing solutions. Finally, the Community Health Accelerator, which you'll hear a little bit more about at the end of this presentation, is a competitive cohort-based program that really takes things up a notch. It includes things such as mentorship, pitch coaching, structured consultation, and peer collaboration opportunities, all designed to help early-stage companies overcome the challenges that often cause startups to fail. Most importantly, participants in the accelerator will have the opportunity to pilot their solutions with MHM's network, providing a real-world testing ground to validate and refine their innovations in ways that drive lasting health equity. I took a look at the statistics from last year, and we do have folks that are in the room, yes, but we also have people who are joining us online. And although we don't know exactly where they're joining us from, last year, to put this into perspective, there were 26 companies that applied for the Healthcare Accelerator. 12 of them were located in Texas. So as we're having these conversations and really trying to plant some seeds on where to spend time, entrepreneurially speaking, this message is starting to find its way into places outside of our borders. What I would suggest to you is as you learn more about social determinants of health, and we'll get into that here in a couple seconds, but as you start to get more familiar with the subject matter, it really starts to open up a thought process that then leads to an opportunity, and that opportunity having the opportunity to impact at scale through the MHM Velocity relationship and this program, that being two partners who are sustaining each other. Meaning MHM is funding, Velocity is trying to enable, and then MHM is saying, hey, look, and you can utilize our network to test and validate that. Now, what are the social determinants of health? Each of these initiatives is designed to accelerate solutions for health equity. But to fully grasp their impact, we must first define the problem. So what exactly are the social determinants of health? At their core, SDOH are non-medical factors that significantly shape a person's overall health and quality of life. These are the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age, and they often determine whether someone has access to the resources they need to thrive. Let's look at a few key examples. Economic mobility. That dictates whether individuals can afford essentials like healthy food, stable housing, and health care coverage, factors that directly impact well-being. Education. Education opens the door to better jobs, higher incomes, and improved health literacy, all of which contribute to longer, healthier lives. Reliable transportation, safe housing, strong social support, and networks, they all play a critical role in a person's ability to access medical care, employment, and community resources. When these foundational elements are lacking, the consequences are severe. Higher rates of chronic illness, reduced life expectancy, and increased healthcare costs. These interconnected challenges reinforce the urgency of our collective mission by bringing awareness to systemic disparities, fostering innovative solutions, and supporting new ventures. We can begin to bridge the gaps that have historically left too many communities behind. Today's event, is another step in that journey, a step toward building an ecosystem that supports equitable, sustainable health solutions for South Texas and beyond. It is my pleasure to introduce our featured guest today, Mr. Jose Padilla. Jose, Jose is a seasoned legal professional with a proven track record of representing technology and growth companies, investors, and venture capital funds in a wide range of corporate and transactional matters, including mergers and acquisitions, financings, and general corporate and securities law. A first-generation immigrant and the first in his family to graduate high school, Jose is passionate about continuous learning and draws inspiration from those around him. With experience at top national law firms, billion-dollar companies, and startups, he has negotiated on behalf of both large corporations and individuals facing critical challenges. Jose is also a peer of mine in the Alamo Angels, very active in that community, and he himself a startup founder, being the founder of Legalmente AI, which is an innovative platform harnessing the power of AI to provide accessible, cost-effective legal solutions, saving clients up to 90% in legal costs. We are lucky to have you here today. Thank you very much for joining us. Without further ado, Mr. Jose Padilla.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Happy to be here and happy to have people willing to be here online and in person for it's not often that people want to come to listen to a lawyer speak about legal topics. So unless you're required to for like CLE. But with that said, what we're going to be covering is, and we're going pretty quickly, this is an area where I could talk about this for hours, but you guys are going to be lucky enough, we're going to try to keep this to like 20 minutes or so. So what we're going over is the legal considerations for raising capital. Basically kind of the process, kind of the basics of what you need to do in order to be able to accept investment capital if you're having a startup. And one thing to note is a startup as opposed to like a small business where it would be different options. And the difference is that a startup is a company that is trying to grow quickly. So if you're trying to grow quickly, there's a certain way that things are done. And we already kind of gone over myself and who I am. Thank you to Marcus for that great introduction. But I've been doing this for a lot of years now. And our objectives, the three areas that we're covering is forming an entity, creating the capital structure, and creating the investment structure. That's really the kind of the basics. So as far as forming the entity, you might have heard of an LLC, you might have heard of a corporation, C Corp, S Corp. What you need to know is a Delaware corporation is what you have to worry about. An LLC is a great entity for many kinds of businesses, but if you're doing a startup, it needs to be a corporation. And C Corp and S Corp are actually, those are not legal categories. Those are IRS designations. So a lot of people get confused. They're not legal. Every corporation you form is by default a C Corp. And you have to ask the IRS to change the designation to an S Corp. An S Corp cannot accept investment because an S Corp can only have shareholders who are natural persons. In other words, an individual. So most investors will invest through an entity, and an entity cannot be a shareholder in an S Corp, and thus you have to be a C Corp. And the thing to remember is that you're automatically one when you form one. You form a corporation, you're a C Corp. Don't need to do anything special. And so that's why when you're incorporating, the things you have to remember is, what's the purpose? You're looking for venture capital, you're looking for investment, be a corporation, and stay as a C Corp. And whether you do it in your home state or Delaware, the thing to remember under the law, in the US, you can incorporate any state you want to. Each state is a different process. But Delaware is the state that's the most common. It is starting to be talked about whether Texas corporations should be the standard for startups. That has become in the conversation due to Elon Musk moving all of his entities, reincorporating them in Texas. Meta, which is Facebook, they recently reincorporated into Texas as well. Dropbox, a couple others, they've now moved out of Delaware. So it's a question now. Texas started having its own business court system. So that's also put Texas into play as to whether it should be competing with Delaware. But right now, Delaware is still kind of the standard. But just note, you want to be safe, Delaware Corporation, but you could argue for Texas right now. And also, the thing to note with a corporation, it is double taxation. So you have to pay taxes. The corporation pays taxes and files with the IRS separately. And then any dividends it gives to the shareholders, that's income to the shareholders, so it's taxed 2 times. Sometimes I have clients who just forget, they don't realize, I have to file taxes for this. Just note, you will have to file taxes annually on your corporation as if it's a separate person. And then there's QSBS, which I'll discuss shortly. To note, the corporation, Owners of a corporation are called shareholders or stockholders. Those terms are interchangeable. The management is done through a board of directors. So basically, the shareholders elect the board of directors, and the board of directors manage the company, and they appoint the executive team. So all of the officers and the employees, they're essentially done by the board of directors, who controls that. The governing document is a certificate of incorporation and bylaws. So if you hear the term operating agreement, that refers to an LLC. So that doesn't have anything to do with a corporation. So a corporation is governed by the certificate of incorporation and the bylaws. And then again, the way it's taxed separately. That separate taxation, again, that's what it means by C Corp. C Corp means it's taxed like a corporation. And the reason they call it C Corp, what it means, it's under the IRS tax code, it means it's taxed under subchapter C of the IRS tax code. And subchapter C has to do with corporations. Subchapter S has to do with S corporations. QSBS stands for Qualified Small Business Stock. I talk about this because it is very important. It's the reason why, or it's one of many reasons, but it's the main reasons why investors only want to invest in a corporation. Because if you invest in a corporation, and this includes founders when you're getting your own shares, if you hold shares in a corporation for more than 5 years, and when you sell it after the 5 years, the corporation has less than $50 million in assets, and $50 million in assets doesn't mean income, it's assets. So you could be having, $1 billion in revenue, but the actual assets you have is less than 50 million. If you hold that, and it's in certain industries, which include most technology industries, and there's a few other criteria, but these are the main ones that you can control. If you meet all these criteria, then your gains, when you sell your stock, it's tax-free. Now, it's limited up to $10 million or 10 times the basis, but basically you'll get tax-free status for a good chunk of your gains. And because of that, investors, they want 0% tax, so that's why they will invest only in corporations. If you do an LLC, you are not applicable for this tax treatment, and the 5 years starts from when you have shares. So if you use an LLC and then you convert, the 5 years begins after you convert. So that's the reason why investors only do corporations. So the capital structure, and what that really means is your ownership table, or capitalization table, we call it. We call it capitalization as opposed to ownership, because ownership is just how many shares are actually issued. Capitalization will include not only how many are issued, but what's possible to issue, which would include stock options. It would include convertible notes, safes, things that can convert into shares. So that's why we use the term capitalization, because it includes more than just what's actually existing, what could exist. The thing to remember is to keep it clean. What that means is if you start handing out stock to everybody that everyone you've ever met, and you have 100 stockholders, that will dissuade investors get involved, because every stockholder has rights, and those rights can be used against you in the future. So because of that, you want to be careful not to have too many stockholders. Every stockholder in a startup, when it's in its infancy, should be someone that is contributing to the success of the startup. It's hard enough as it is. Startups have a high rate of failure, so you need to make sure that who has shares is someone that is contributing and actively contributing. It's hard also to fix mistakes. So, and there's two reasons why, and the two reasons, one is tax reasons. You can have a tax effect if you make a mistake, and then you'll need to amend your tax return, and there's things you have to do, or maybe have to pay taxes. There's the mistakes you can make can just cause issues tax-wise. The other issue is emotions. You have someone, you get excited, I'm going to give you 10%, and then you realize they're actually not going to be contributing to the company. They're actually not worth the percent that you thought they were. It's hard emotionally to then tell somebody, well, you know what, you're only worth, quote unquote, 1%. So fixing such mistakes become hard because of tax reasons and because of emotions. So that's why just be careful and considerate when you're thinking about issuing, who's going to be owning shares. And investors will see that. And so who gets what? I put this just to, people get confused. You'll hear the word founder shares, advisory shares, and people come to me thinking that those are different types of shares. They're really just ways to, a founder share is just a share that is owned by a founder. That's it. And what is it? It's going to be common stock. It's always going to be common stock. Your helpers, I call them helpers, that's going to be employees, advisors, board directors, anyone that's not one of the founders who are getting shares after you've built some value, they should be getting stock options. And it's stock options to purchase common stock. The reason why is because it's tax advantage. Basically, if you give someone just shares and your company has value, they need to pay taxes on the value of shares that they receive for free. So to avoid that, because someone doesn't want to pay taxes on a company that may fail, and we'll have questions at the end. I'm going to try to get through this. But so what happens is you give options. Options, you don't pay taxes until you've exercised. Well, there's two types of options, but either till it's exercised or when you've sold the shares. So you don't pay taxes up front. That's why people use stock options. And then with investors, they want preferred stock. Preferred stock has more rights, and they get paid first before common stock. And so that's what investors want. So that's kind of the three categories just to know. And that kind of this rule, don't like jerks under your cap table. There's something people don't think about, but I've had investors who won't invest in a company just because they see that they've gotten an investment from someone or have someone involved that is just known in the community, has someone that's hard to work with or someone they don't like, and so they won't invest. So that's just one thing to note. Also, because shareholders have rights, and if they have those rights, they can use it against you. And the rule of thumb, basically, as a lawyer, it's the person who got like one share that's going to cause the most problems. So that's usually what happens. Here's an example of a cap table. Just for people to know what it looks like. It'll list, how many shares there are, just so you can see kind of what it looks like. And the whole point is to determine, okay, the reason you use it is for two reasons. One is to know how many shares you need for a vote. So a lot of times the vote will be based on a majority. So you want to see, okay, how many are issued, and that tells you how much are needed for a vote. And then there's what they call fully diluted, which is including potential shares like stock options. And stock options they don't own shares, so they don't have a vote. But if you were to sell the company, usually those things would then convert immediately, and so then they get a piece of the pie on a sale of the company. So that's the two reasons you use it, to determine how many shares you need for a vote or how much percent of the company they get upon a sale of the company. So then the investment structure, the one thing to note is, what you have to know is what's an accredited investor. That definition is critical for knowing how to comply with regulations. So I'll just state it now. An accredited investor, there's a list of things that count as an accredited investor. The two most important things to note, the most common ways that people become an accredited investor. And here's the thing. There's no like accrediting program. There's no official thing. There's no like, you get a card that says I'm accredited. Accredited just means this is a status. And a status is based on the fact that, one, you either have an income for the past 2 years and expect to have in this year of $200,000 or more, or $300,000 jointly with their spouse, or you have a net worth of over $1 million for the past 2 years and expect to have for this year as well, excluding the value of your primary residence. So that meets the definition of accredited investor. When I was in law school, we called this the wallet test. That's really it's just a money value. And so that makes you an accredited investor. There's a few other criteria, but I won't discuss them because the most important ones you need to know is just that wallet test. Basically, do they have a lot of money? And if they do, they can be an accredited investor. The reason that's important is because of securities regulation. There's federal and state regulations. The general rule federally is you cannot sell shares in a corporation without registering it. Registration is what you hear of as an IPO. An IPO can cost millions of dollars. So to register stock is expensive. So what you're looking for is an exemption from regulation. How do I not have to register it? And there is various different ways, like you've heard of crowdfunding. That's an exemption. The most common ones for startups is Regulation D, and it's Rule 506B, 506C. Both of those are based on getting investment from accredited investors. So I'll start with C. C is basically if you have only accredited investors, then you can fall under 506C, and general solicitation is allowed, which means you can advertise. You can say, hey, you can ask anybody, hey, would you want to invest? But they have to be accredited investors. But if you do this way, then you have to verify that they are accredited, which means you could either do it yourself or through a service. You have to get them to give you proof of their income or their net worth, which some investors may not want to. That could be an issue. There are services that will do it for you in a way that protects their privacy. But that's what you can do. 506B means you cannot have general solicitation. In other words, you have to know the person. It has to be through your network. And it doesn't mean you have to know them well, but it means it's someone it means you're not going out there and advertising to just anybody. You're actually just doing it through your own network. But if you do it that way, you can have up to 35 unaccredited investors. I would recommend don't have any unaccredited, because if you do one unaccredited under 506B, then you have to have your financials audited, and there's some other rules. It increases your costs it basically increases your costs, and it's to get someone who has less money, thus having less to invest. And it makes things more complicated. But if you keep it no general solicitation and keep it to only accredited investors, then the accredited investors can self-verify their net worth or income. And that's because it should be coming from your network. So you should know that, okay, they have the money to qualify. The other thing to remember, and then when you qualify for those things, there's no real process. There's no official process with the government that you do to qualify. You just know that you qualify, and then you file a Form D. Form D is free to file with the SEC, but you need to do it within 14 days of the first investment that you received. The Form D is basically the main requirement that you have under federal regulations, but then there's state ones. You might hear the word blue sky laws. Blue sky law just means state regulations, state securities regulations. Every state is different, completely different in every state. The thing to note that if you follow federal 506B or 506C, those preempt state laws. You don't have to follow the state laws if you follow 506B or 506C. So that's the reason why you want to follow those, because then you don't have to worry about the state ones, other than most states require notice filings. And those notice filings usually come with a fee. For example, in Texas, it's similar to Form D. It's basically a state version of Form D. And in Texas, there is a fee between $100 to $500, depending on the amount of the investment. And it's in the state that the investor lives in. So if you have one investor in Colorado, you need to look to see, do I have to make a notice filing in Colorado, and how much it could be. Some states, it's as high as $1,500 for the fee. So that's the thing to remember. If you do not follow them, there are potential penalties that are involved. Next, we'll go to the funding vehicles. This is basically like, how do you actually get to invest? Like, what's the agreement that you make? A lot of people think, okay, I'm just going to sell stock. You don't want to do that, because that creates valuation, and you could value the company in different ways that could be used against you in the future. And two, you may not want to give them rights immediately, because again, anyone that has stock has stockholder rights, and stockholder rights can be used against you. So, and the usual way that things begin now is these seed stage or pre-seed, and it's done through what's called a SAFE or a convertible note. And a SAFE stands for a simple agreement for future equity. The template was made by Y Combinator, and it's basically just a contractual right for whatever amount that they invest to convert into preferred stock when you have a preferred stock round. So it kind of kicks the valuation thing in the future. It just says, in the future, when you sell preferred stock, the amount that I invest is going to convert into that. It usually comes with a discount. So often you'll have a discount with that. Convertible note is similar, but it also has a debt component. So basically, it's kind of like I'm giving you a promissory note. You have to pay interest. You have a maturity date. But before that maturity date, if you have a preferred stock round, it'll convert into preferred stock, similar to how a SAFE would. Basically, what a SAFE is basically the same thing as a convertible note, but it's stripped of the debt element. In the history of it, I've been doing this for 25 years. When I started, neither of these things existed. The first thing was just selling the preferred stock. That was the first round of investment. But that was expensive. And the whole industry, by the way, is designed around how to lower legal costs. So everything is around how to pay lawyers less. So that's why they figured out, well, how do we, if the preferred stock round, it can cost $30,000 in legal fees, sometimes more. So how to make this cheaper? Well, they thought convertible notes. And let's say a convertible note, because that was often used to do short-term loans. Well, let's make it a 2 or 3 year term. And then, but that still costs about $5,000, sometimes up to $10,000 in legal fees. So like, well, how can we make it even cheaper? Well, then they strip out the debt element, then you just have a contract that's even cheaper. That's why you came up with the SAFE. And a lot of times they have this template SAFEs, and you don't even need a lawyer to look at it. But that was kind of the evolution of that. The thing to note, discount, valuation cap. Valuation cap is just another way of discounting. So a discount is simple. It's just a percent discount. You say 20, you get a note with 20% discount, $5 million cap. That means if during the priced round, it's going to be sold at $5 per share, you got a 20% discount. That means that it converts at $4 per share. If you have a valuation cap, let's say during this priced round, it's a $5 million valuation, $10 million valuation with a $5 million cap. That means it's a 50% discount. It's the 5 million divided by the 10 million. So that means if it's $5 per share, you get the investor SAFE converts at $2.50 per share. So it's a way to get a discount off of what everyone else is paying. And you do that because if I'm investing in a SAFE or a note, I'm doing it early on, I'm taking a bigger risk, and I should get a discount. And that's in a preferred stock is actual shares. There's Series C preferred stock, which is a lesser version of Series A. It's a simpler version, so it's supposed to be cheaper because there's less documents. But both give more control rights. A note and a SAFE give no control rights to investors. Investors have no say in your business. With preferred stock, they usually will include rights that will include, like, certain things need approval of the preferred stockholders. Like maybe you can't change your line of business without getting their approval. You can't get debt without their approval. And so because you need to go after, they're investing higher amounts, and so they want more protections. Just a comparison here, typical amounts, for a SAFE. Here's the basic kind of rule of thumb here. If an investor is investing more money, they want more protections. So a SAFE is done because it's a lower amount, so why am I going to spend so much on legal fees? And that's really what drives it. It's the legal fees that drive it all. So if you're doing preferred stock, well, if I'm going to be putting in over $1 million, you know what? It's worth it to spend $20,000, $30,000 in legal fees to protect myself from giving that amount. But if I'm putting in $50,000, why am I going to spend $20,000, $30,000 on legal fees for the $50,000 investment? Why even should I spend $5,000 on legal fees? No, I'm going to use a SAFE. A SAFE, basically, I can do it for no legal fees. So that's what drives which choice that you use. And if you're a founder, you have a startup, oftentimes I've had them come to me and says, hey, the investor doesn't want to use a SAFE because the SAFE doesn't have any protection for the investor. And what I tell them is, well, tell the investor to help you pay for your legal fees to do a convertible note, because that'll be like $5,000. And I've never had them come back and say, oh, I'll pay the legal fees. No, they'll say, okay, I'll use the SAFE every single time. So that's why, kind of structuring it. What do you do it? It's about how much you're raising, what are the legal costs, and then your milestones, your fundraising plan, because you'll be needing to get additional fundraising. You should have milestones. You should tell the investor how much, what will I accomplish with the amounts you're giving me, and then that'll take me to the next level. So then I need an additional amount to get to the next level, and hopefully after a couple rounds, you're at a point where either you sell the company or you're profitable. So if you have that plan, investors like it. And two, it helps you plan all the dilution that you're getting, because you start off maybe 100% of your company, you're going to end up with a lot less over time. So the summary of this is when you're trying to raise money, you're an early stage startup, what do you need to do if I want to accept investment? Well, you form a Delaware corporation. You create your capital structure, which is issuing shares to the founders and to maybe some advisors. And then you create an investment structure, which is your SAFE, or convertible note, most likely. And yeah, that's, I don't know if we have time for some questions. Yeah.
I have one question regarding the stock options. Just to make sure I understand correctly. So let's say I want to tell an employee like, I want to give you stock options, and I'll sell them to you can buy them for $1. Like, is that how it works? Like,
Can you repeat your question, please?
yes. So let's say I want to offer an employee stock options, right? Would that mean that, like, look, man, these stocks these options I'm giving you, my one day cost $1,000 per stock, but you have the right to buy them for $5. Is that how it works?
So to issue stock options in a compliant manner, it has to be based on what's called a 409A valuation. So that would be, you go to a third-party expert, there's a lot of companies that do this, and they provide a valuation, they give you the price per share, and that needs to be the exercise price that you're talking about. So it's not one that you determine, it's one that has to be determined by a third party. And you have to set up a stock option plan, and so that's something you usually need to have an attorney involved. Just to let you know, like, for example, we charge a flat fee of $2,000 for the stock plan documents and the award agreements templates, and then you'll need to get a 409A valuation done. That will usually cost, I've seen pricing between $1,000 to $4,000. Most of the services usually charge around $2,000, and then you have that, and you have to update it at least every year, or at least every year that you're wanting to issue stock options. But yeah, it used to be. So given my age, I'm doing this long enough, back in the day, when I started this in 2000, you could do it the way you said it. The company just determined it on their own. And then in 2001, 2002, there were all these scandals at Enron and MCI and all this stuff, and they were like pricing things in a way that was, causing a lot of problems. They were doing it illegally, and so then they came down and said, nope, everyone has to do a third-party valuation, and this was put into the regulations under Section 409A. And so that's why it's called a 409A valuation. And then that's how you have to do it. And one thing to note, so what I advise my clients, sometimes in the beginning, you don't have the money to spend $4,000 or $5,000 to set all this up. So what you can do is you give an employee what they call promised options. And that's essentially just an IOU. It's just a contract, there's something in the contract that says, I'm going to give you this many stock options under these terms once I have enough money to set up a stock option plan. And that's a promised option, and that's what I advise a lot of my clients to do in the beginning when you don't have money to set all that up. Yeah.
Well, brief follow-up. So just to make sure, let's say the third-party valuation of the stock price, would that freeze for that specific issuance, for that specific employee, or would it fluctuate through the years depending on the valuation?
So it's not specific to an employee, it's just for the company. That's the company's valuation, but you need to update it and once you issue those stock options, it's in that agreement, that's what it is, forever. It's frozen for that issuance, that grant. You grant another one, if the value has changed, then you have to put a different value. Now, if it's within the same year and there's been no material events, the law says that you have to do a new valuation at least annually or upon a material event. So in other words, you accept $1 million investment, well, your valuation's changed. So now you need to do a new 409A valuation. And then any stock issued after that then needs to be under the new valuation. So that's how it works.
So as we make our way around the room to gather questions, for those who are joining us online, there's quite a few of you, please submit your questions to the chat, and we will do our best to get to all of the submitted questions. So, Jose, thank you, by the way. Stay with us, because I'm sure there's going to be more questions. Are there any questions in the room? Or are there some online, Nicole? Okay, so while we're waiting for questions, I actually have a follow-up question to potentially maybe spark some thinking as we look at safe notes and there being the discount mechanisms that you mentioned, both a valuation cap and a discount. I've seen safes where both of those things are offered. Somebody is also offering a discount and a val cap. So when a capital event happens, are those done in a particular sequence? they're assessing the discount first and then moving to the valuation cap discount? Does it make a difference?
So basically, it's just an option. So basically, they get both, and they get whatever gives them the bigger discount is what they choose. The reason why is so a valuation cap can give you a really huge discount or none at all. So if the valuation cap is set at 10 million, but then when you have the price round, the valuation of the company is at 9 million, well, then that means the cap isn't into play, and thus there's no discount for it. So if the safe only had a valuation cap of 10 million, they get no discount. But if they have the valuation cap at 10 million, but they also had a discount of 20%, then they would get a discount on that even though the valuation is below the cap. And then so if you have a discount rate, you always get some kind of discount. That's kind of like the minimum discount you'll have. And the valuation cap could have no discount or may have less than, let's say it's $11 million valuation, but you have a 10 million cap. Well, then that means your discount right there, it's going to be less than 10%. So it'll be, you have a 20% discount rate. I'm going to take that. Yeah. But the valuation cap can be much larger. I've seen examples where sometimes someone invested really early on and they had a $3 million valuation cap, which is pretty much the lowest that you'll see that's reasonable. And then in the deal, the preferred stock round, it ended up being a $30 million valuation. So that safe converted with a 90% discount. And so that's one of the ways that a cap can give you a much bigger discount than otherwise you could ever get. Because if you were just negotiating a discount rate and you came to someone and says, hey, if an investor came to you and says, hey, I want to give you money, but on a conversion, I want a 90% discount, you would say, no way. That's completely unreasonable. I've never seen more than 30%. 30% is usually the highest. But with the valuation cap, well, if the valuation gets really, really high, that actually means a bigger discount. And that's kind of like a double-edged sword as a founder. As a founder, you want the valuation to be really high. So for all the new money, they're all doing it at this really high valuation. But for this safe holder, they're getting a huge discount here. So.
Anything yet? So follow up to that, speaking of valuations, yes, there are third-party valuations that exist, but for founders who may not have the money to invest in a third-party valuation, do you have any advice on either methods, resources, platforms, if you will, that would allow them to have what would be viewed as a reasonable valuation?
So the one thing to note is you don't need to have a third-party valuation unless you're going to issue stock options, or unless you have some special case that I haven't heard of. But generally speaking, the valuation that an investor gives you is not, this is separate from that. This is similar to the valuation of like your home for property taxes. You want the 409A valuation to be as low as possible. So it's not going to be taken as the actual value of your company. It's just the value for tax purposes. So that's one thing to note. And so you do it in order to comply, to have the tax value for the purposes of issuing stock options. And so that's why I said if you don't have enough money for that, but you want to be able to offer stock options, you can offer promised options. The other thing is if it's really early on, you haven't built any value, you can issue it at par value, which basically is saying it's really kind of a nominal value. Founders usually issue themselves shares at par value. Early on, people, if you haven't built any value in the company. The problem with that is that the IRS can always contest that. The IRS can say, you know what, it's actually worth something, and you should have paid taxes on the value that you received. So that's, you're kind of open to that, but if it's really early on, you have a strong argument. So that's one thing you could do is just issue stock directly. And the other thing is the promised options, which is a promise to give you options once I form it. And then if you are doing a 409A valuation, the less expensive ways to go about it is usually through these, there's several companies that offer cap table management. There's Carta, Pulley, trying to think off the top of my head. There's JP Morgan has one that's they recently started like last year. I think it's called Global Advisors, and they usually price into it like it includes one free 409A valuation every year. But they'll usually charge maybe around $2,000 or $1,500 for their service annually, and it just includes that. The less expensive one I've seen is JP Morgan's. I think they'll do it for $900. So that's the least expensive I've seen. I don't know if it's still, the prices change constantly. So I know Carta's it's kind of negotiable. So these are all change, but that's usually how you do it. Rather than going to a valuation service that all they do is that, you can do that, but those tend to be a little more expensive than when you do it with the cap table management companies.
So there's a follow-up question that was submitted in the chat by Johanna. Thank you very much for the question. That's a follow-up and very similarly themed to what I had asked you about discount caps and valuation caps, and if there was sequencing on how those things were provided to the investor. So the question is, do they get the benefit of both of those discounts, or at the time of conversion, do they pick the one that most favors the transaction?
Yeah, they just pick the one that's most favors. They don't get both. So it's one or the other.
Okay, got it. Is there another one? So since this program is meant to inspire innovation right here in the state of Texas, I want to take us back to one of the points of your presentation in formation. Typically, just kind of general chatter would say, hey, you got to be a Delaware corporation. And it sounded like you said, hey, there's some advantages to folks reincorporating in Texas. And since, again, we're trying to promote that kind of activity here in the state, are there 1, 2, 3 bullet points that you could provide to folks who are looking to either incorporate here or reincorporate here?
Yeah, so the reason this movement is growing, I'm getting this question more and more every month, and it started essentially because of Elon Musk. And what happened to him was, so traditionally, Delaware was the gold standard. Every lawyer in law school, we all learn about this court case, Smith v. Gorkum, in 1953 in Delaware, and basically the judges said that we will be hands-off on any business decisions, that we will not rule on business decisions. But what Delaware did last year was they ruled on Elon Musk's compensation package, where he had a package that said that, hey, the valuation of the Tesla was at $6 billion, and if it went up to $600 billion, they would give him like $90 billion. I may be wrong on the exact numbers, but it's that magnitude. At the time, everyone thought, no way he can make the valuation at $600 billion. Not possible. And if he were to do something so incredible, he would deserve $90 billion. That was the thought. A good 80-90% of the shareholders approved it. Delaware court came and said, that's not fair. It's not fair to give somebody $90 billion. So they disallowed it. Traditionally, judges never made a business decision. Now they did one based on fairness. When you're an attorney, if a judge is making decisions based on fairness, just know that that means that everything's up for grabs, because every judge can determine something as being fair or not fair. That is a really wide open standard. And what Elon Musk did was he went back to the shareholders, they reapproved it again. 90% of shareholders said, yes, give him $90 billion. Court again said, that's not fair. At the same time, the court said it was fair to give the attorneys that brought the case against Elon Musk, it was fair to have the shareholders pay $1 billion in legal fees. So that now has made a lot of people turned off in Delaware, because now the Delaware courts have become activist and everything's based on fairness, when before everything was based on, on these kind of hands-off business decisions or business decisions rules. And at the same time, Texas started its own business court last year, and that's that's new. Is the second state to do so. Most states, if you have a business law case, you're going in front of a judge that may have done a divorce case previously and has no experience with corporations. So Delaware had those specialized judges. Now Texas has those specialized judges. So that's why Texas is now becoming a better place, because we're focused on, hey, business decisions are going to be business decisions, not subject to a judge's preferences. And so that's the reason why. And then generally speaking, Texas laws have generally been business friendly. I'll just give you an example of what it means to be business friendly. In Delaware, for example, if you want to file certificate of incorporation, you can pay extra to have it expedited and have it done within a couple hours. In California, it can take weeks. And in Delaware, it's $100, around $100. In California, it's like $800. And it takes weeks and weeks and weeks. So that's kind of like the two extremes, where like you want to file for you get incorporated, you need to do it fast. You can do that in states like Delaware. Texas is kind of in between. It takes about a week, sometimes 2 weeks. But Texas is looking at, okay, how to make things better. So that's the reason why people are starting to look at Texas now for that. And while here, I guess I do want to make sure I want to plug kind of myself. Like you mentioned before, I do have a mission to offer reasonable legal cost for things. So to incorporate, issue founder stock, kind of set you up to do the things that I kind of talked about. I do that at a flat fee of $500. So kind of lets you kind of have everything set up and be ready to accept investment funds. And then I also set up with Legal Mente, which is an AI paralegal that can help a lot, and it can offer doing similar services for $89. So just wanted to kind of give that plug of what it kind of
No, I'm actually glad that you did, because again, just kind of creating an analogy to social determinants of health innovation is you are trying to create access mechanisms for people to start businesses or receive legal advice, which the outcomes of those things are really what we want to focus on, right? Like they're coming to you for a reason, but really they're trying to create or they're trying to do something, right? So again, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because practical terms are what are going to help us in our messaging, right? So people say, hey, Texas is a business-friendly environment. Okay, but what does that mean? Right? So less regulation, there is new infrastructure by way of business courts being established, et cetera, and then using the practical example of Elon having been approved something that later was, hey, this isn't fair. And it's, again, so when we speak in practical terms about what does it mean to innovate in a space, it's very important to have leaders such as yourself who are not just providing services, but have also taken this on as mission to say, hey, look, I realize that I'm a lawyer, but I'm also trying to drive down the cost of access for a wide swath of people who really need this kind of consultation and or these services. So again, thank you very much. Are there any? Okay, so seems appropriate to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are in the room and joining us online, you will receive a survey shortly after this has concluded. I would encourage you to please respond to the survey. We're going to try to continue to iterate this offering to make sure that the things that we're talking about, and certainly the speakers that we're putting in front of you, are helping you in the moment. Certainly we understand that we're messaging things that we won't see the outcomes of until much further down the road. But what it does is, and we spoke to this last month, was what it does is it allows you to leave here and carry forward a message, a thought process, a connection, or an opportunity. And when we talk about friendly environments or business-friendly environments, right, eBridge is a business-friendly environment. Jose has established a business-friendly environment by continuing to invest his time, a lot of this voluntarily, to be able to speak in practical terms, to be able to offer access to services, just as much as Methodist Healthcare Ministries and Velocity Texas, with the help of Duke Capital and UTRGV, are putting on these seminar series, creating things like the Startup Boot Camp in conjunction with Geekdom, and then having the Community Health Accelerator Program beginning a little later this year by way of its marketing, and then the 8-week program itself. So again, these things are being done to affect the health of every member of the community. Not just the people who are in the room and not just the people who are joining us online. You have raised your hand and said, hey, look, I'm interested, if nothing else, to learn some information about an opportunity that could impact the community that I live in, much less kind of a greater kind of global good. So our appreciation for your interest and for being here or online today. Our next session is March 27th, where we will welcome Dr. Luis Martinez. He is somebody who is very active in the venture capital space. He is a venture associate for Capital Factory. If you're not familiar with Capital Factory, I would encourage you to get curious and interested. It is yet another ecosystem that has a really big presence in the state of Texas. But on the heels of that, I know that it's Charo Days in Brownsville, and everybody is interested to get to the parade and all the festivities that will be occurring today. So thank you very much for having us here today. We really appreciate the hospitality, the facilities, and certainly your time. We'll see you in March. Thank you.